The first time I looked at my bank balance and felt safe, I slept worse that night. It was still dark outside, that soft gray kind of dark you only notice when you're already awake. I was at the kitchen table with a mug that had gone lukewarm, listening to the furnace kick on and off like it couldn't decide what it was doing. I opened my banking app, squinted at the numbers, and there it was. More than I'd ever had sitting in one place. And instead of relief, my chest tightened. I didn't say that out loud to anyone. I smiled the next day. I answered texts like everything was fine. But I kept thinking, why am I still scared if I'm finally okay? That's the part people don't talk about when they talk about aging and money. They act like peace is a math problem. Like if the numbers add up, your heart will settle down. But some nights, your heart doesn't care what the spreadsheet says. I used to believe peace in old age was mostly about a bank account. I really did. I grew up around the kind of folks who measured security in practical things. Paid off bills, food in the pantry, heat in the house, enough left over so you didn't have to ask. Money wasn't greed. It was permission to breathe. So I worked. I saved. I worried. I did the whole tight-jawed, responsible thing. And yes, money matters. Let's not pretend it doesn't. Being broke is loud. It takes up the whole room. But once you've got enough to keep the lights on and the prescriptions filled, something else starts making the most noise. Have you ever noticed that? You can be fine on paper and still feel like you're standing on ice. That morning at the kitchen table, I stared at the balance, and my first thought wasn't, thank God. My first thought was, what if I mess this up? That's an ugly thought to admit when you're older, because you're supposed to be past that, supposed to be wiser, supposed to have it together. But I had this sudden fear of making one wrong click, one wrong decision, one wrong phone call. Like peace was something fragile I could drop and shatter. And it wasn't just money fear. Not really, it was control fear. A few days later, I went to the pharmacy. Just routine. Pick up what I pick up. The place smelled like that mix of clean floor and plastic packaging, and the line was longer than it should have been for a Tuesday. When it was finally my turn, the young clerk slid the little screen toward me and said, "It'll ask you to confirm." I tapped. The screen blinked and asked for a PIN I hadn't used in months. I froze. You know that feeling when people are behind you and you can feel their impatience without anyone saying a word? My fingers hovered like they didn't belong to me. I tried one number. Wrong. Tried another. Wrong again. The clerk wasn't rude, but he did that thing where he looks past you like he's already moving on in his head. I could feel my face get hot. I could feel my dignity slipping, and it had nothing to do with whether I could afford the medicine. It was the sudden, sharp awareness that the world doesn't slow down for you. Not for your memory, not for your nerves, not for your hands that don't move as quick as they used to. I wanted to disappear right there between the gum display and the cough drops. I laughed it off because that's what you do. I said, "Oh, I'm having one of those days." The clerk shrugged, and I ended up using a different card. But on the drive home, I realized something that felt like a small twist of a knife. The peace I thought I was saving for wasn't living in the money. It was living in whether I still trusted myself. Because if you don't trust yourself, your mind, your judgment, your steadiness, no amount of money will feel like enough. It'll just feel like something else you might lose. That was the first little payoff, and it wasn't pleasant. It didn't come with music swelling in the background. It came with me sitting in my driveway for a minute longer than usual, hands on the steering wheel, looking at my own front door like it was a question. I kept thinking about that pharmacy moment, not because it was dramatic, but because it was private. Nobody saw it as a life lesson. It was just one small crack. And the thing about cracks is you start noticing them everywhere once you see the first one. Like the mail. I used to love the mail. Bills came, sure, but so did birthday cards, little notes, church newsletters, coupons you'd actually use. Now it's mostly warnings, urgent notices, things written in a tone like you've already failed. One afternoon, I pulled out a letter with bold red print on the outside. My stomach flipped before I even opened it. I stood there by the trash can, sunlight coming through the window onto the counter, and I could smell onion powder from the jar I'd spilled earlier and never fully cleaned up. I was holding this envelope like it was a snake. And do you know what it was? A marketing offer. Not even a real problem. Just someone trying to stir up panic so I'd call a number and act now. I sat down right there on the kitchen stool and felt embarrassed. Embarrassed that a piece of paper could make my heart race. Embarrassed that I could be tricked into fear. I didn't tell anyone that either. Because shame gets quiet when you age. It doesn't yell. It whispers. It says, you should know better. You're supposed to be smart. You're supposed to be careful. You're supposed to be secure. So here's what I started understanding slowly, the way older people understand things. Through repetition, not revelation, peace in old age depends on something deeper than your account balance. It depends on whether your life feels sturdy. And sturdy isn't just money. It's simple things that don't show up in retirement calculators, like whether your home is a place you can manage without fighting it, like whether your days have an order that doesn't exhaust you, like whether you have one or two people who don't make you perform, like whether you can forgive yourself for not being who you were at 45. Let me tell you about a moment that sounds small, but it isn't. A Saturday morning, I was trying to fix a stuck window latch. Nothing heroic, just a little metal piece that wouldn't slide, and I wanted fresh air without the whole window rattling. I stood there with my reading glasses slipping down my nose, a dish towel in my hand to get better grip, and I could feel my patience thinning. It wasn't the latch. It was the feeling of needing help for something I used to do without thinking. I pulled a little too hard, and the latch snapped loose in a way that made the frame shudder. My heart jumped like I'd broken the whole thing. I just stood there staring at it, and I felt that old fear rise up again. Not the fear of paying for a repair, the fear of being at the mercy of repairs, the fear of everything becoming a phone call. Have you ever had that thought? The thought that the older you get, the more of your life turns into asking? And I know there are good people. There are honest workers. There are family members who would help. But there's a certain kind of peace that comes from not needing to borrow your own independence. That day, I almost didn't call anyone. I almost just left the window shut forever because it felt easier than admitting I wanted a hand. Then I heard myself say something in my own kitchen that surprised me. I said, "This is ridiculous," out loud, and I laughed. Not a happy laugh, more like a tired one, because I realized I was turning a stuck latch into a verdict on my whole life. And that's what fear does when you're older. It takes small moments and tries to turn them into prophecies. So I did something different. I called my neighbor. Now, I'm not the type who loves asking for help. I'm the type who will struggle quietly until the struggle becomes the story. But I called anyway. He came over with a screwdriver like it was nothing. He didn't make a face. He didn't talk down to me. He just fixed the latch, wiped his hands on his jeans, and said, "There you go." And then, before he left, he said, "You doing okay?" Not in a nosy way, in a real way. And I almost lied. My mouth opened to say, "Oh yeah, I'm fine." But I didn't. I said, "Some days I get spooked, that's all." He nodded like he understood, like it wasn't strange, like I hadn't just confessed something embarrassing. And when he left, the air coming in through that window felt like more than fresh air. It felt like relief, not because someone fixed a latch, because in that moment, my life felt sturdy again. Not by money, by connection, by being known, by not having to act like I'm made of steel. That's one of the open secrets of aging. The older you get, the more peace comes from what's around the money. Money is the fence, but peace is the ground inside it. If the ground is shaky, if your relationships are tense, if your home feels like a burden, if your body feels unpredictable, if your days are empty in a way that scares you, then even a tall fence won't make you calm. And I had to face another truth I didn't want to admit. Sometimes the reason we obsess over our bank account is because it's the one thing we can count. Numbers don't argue. Numbers don't leave. Numbers don't get sick. Numbers don't look at you like you're a problem. So we cling to them. But peace isn't built out of something you can print on a statement. It's built out of trust. Trust in your routines. Trust in your people. Trust in yourself. A few weeks after that, my adult child called. Nothing dramatic, just checking in. I was standing at the sink running water over a plate, watching little bubbles slide away. Outside, it was one of those late afternoon winter days where the light starts disappearing too early and it makes the house feel lonelier than it is. We talked about ordinary things, work, groceries, the weather, and then there was a pause. And I felt that old urge to be easy, to not ask for anything, to not be emotional, to not bring up what's really going on. Because there's a fear older folks carry that doesn't get named much, the fear of becoming weight. So I almost ended the call with a cheerful little goodbye. But instead, I said, "Can I tell you something without you trying to fix it?" There was another pause, but softer, and they said, "Okay." And I told the truth. Not the big truth, just a small one. I said, "Sometimes I'm not scared of money. I'm scared of being alone with my thoughts." I expected awkwardness. I expected them to change the subject. But they didn't. They said, "Me too, sometimes." And I felt this strange, gentle shift, like the air in the room changed temperature by 1 degree. That was another payoff. Not because everything became perfect, but because peace came a little closer. Because I wasn't carrying the whole thing by myself. Now, I'm not telling you peace depends on having a perfect family or a wide circle of friends. Some people don't. Some people can't. Some people have been hurt too much. But I am saying this. Peace in old age depends on whether you have something that holds you when the numbers can't. Sometimes that something is a person. Sometimes it's a community room where people know your name. Sometimes it's a small routine you don't break. Coffee at the same time. A walk even when it's cold. The same chair by the window. Sometimes it's making your home simpler so your mind can rest. Sometimes it's learning to ask for help without feeling like you failed. And sometimes, this is the part that surprised me most, peace is just deciding you're done trying to prove you're still young. Because a lot of anxiety comes from fighting reality, fighting your pace, fighting your needs, fighting your limits like they're shameful. And I used to think accepting those things meant giving up. Now I think it means you finally stopped wasting strength on pretending. Here's the last loop I want to close. The one from that morning at my kitchen table with the lukewarm coffee. Why did I sleep worse, even with enough money? Because money didn't answer the question underneath. And the question underneath was, if something goes wrong, will I still be okay as a person? Not can I pay for it, but can I handle it? Will I have anyone? Will I fall apart? Will I still recognize myself? That's the kind of peace you can't buy. You build it. Slowly. With honest phone calls. With neighbors you don't avoid. with a home that feels kind, not complicated, with boundaries that protect your dignity, with forgiving yourself for being human. And I'll tell you something quiet and true. Some of the calmest people I know aren't the richest. They're the ones who aren't at war with their own life. They've made their world smaller in a good way. They've stopped chasing the feeling of total safety, because nobody gets that. They've chosen steadiness over control. And when you do that, even modest money can feel like enough. If you're listening to me and you've been thinking, I should feel more at peace than I do, you're not broken. You're not ungrateful. You're just noticing what matters now. If you want, tell me this. What's the thing that steals your peace the most these days? Is it money, or is it something underneath it? And if you found one small thing that helps you feel steadier, one habit, one person, one routine, would you share it? I'm always learning too. My sister still calls me Larita sometimes, like we're both young again. And on the days my heart gets loud, I try to remember, peace isn't a number. It's a life you can rest inside.